The text from my mother arrived while I sat in my modest Denver apartment, staring at my laptop screen. The mortgage is due. Those 4 words made my blood run cold. Just 1 month ago. My parents had announced at dinner that they were leaving everything to my brother Jason because he deserved it. The $800,000 house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, everything. They said Jason needed it more because he had a family. While I was single and successful, now they wanted my help. 3 months earlier, I had driven to my parents' house in suburban Denver for what I thought would be another routine Sunday dinner. The spring air was crisp, and I remember thinking how beautiful Mom's garden looked as I walked up the familiar stone pathway. I should have known something was different when I saw Jason's BMW already parked in the driveway. My older brother was never early for anything unless he had an agenda. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual warm hug, but there was something strange in her eyes, almost like guilt. Dad was in the living room, sitting in his recliner but not watching TV, just staring at his hands folded in his lap. Jason was on the couch with his wife Brittany, both of them looking oddly formal for a family dinner. Their kids, Tyler and Madison, were nowhere to be seen. "Where are the kids?" I asked, setting down the bottle of wine I'd brought. "They're at Brittany's mother's house," Jason said quickly. "We thought tonight should be just adults." That should have been my second warning sign. We settled around the dining room table, and Mom served her famous pot roast. But nobody was really eating. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Erica, your mother and I have something important to discuss with you," he began, his voice unusually formal. "We've been doing a lot of thinking about our estate planning." I nodded, pushing my mashed potatoes around my plate. My parents were both in their late 60s, so this conversation wasn't entirely unexpected. "We've decided to leave everything to Jason," Mom said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "The house, our savings, the investment accounts, all of it." The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against my plate. I looked from one face to another, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Jason shifted in his seat but maintained eye contact with me. "It makes sense, Erica. I have a family to provide for. Tyler's going to need college tuition in a few years. And Madison's not far behind. You're doing fine on your own." "Doing fine," I repeated, my voice hollow. "And I don't deserve anything because I'm single and childless." Brittany finally spoke up, her voice syrupy sweet. "Erica, don't make this about you. Think about your nephew and niece. Don't you want them to have security?" The rage that bubbled up in my chest was volcanic. I thought about all the nights I'd spent at the hospital with Mom during her cancer treatment 2 years ago, while Jason was too busy with his latest scheme. I remembered every birthday and holiday where I'd shown up with thoughtful gifts while Jason forgot or grabbed something last minute from a gas station. I recalled the countless times I'd helped Dad with house repairs while Jason couldn't be bothered. When Mom was going through chemo, I said slowly, "Where was Jason?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "I was building my business," Jason said defensively. "You mean the food truck that failed after 3 months?" I shot back. "The one Mom and Dad invested $50,000 in." "That's enough," Dad said firmly. "We've made our decision. The papers are already drawn up." "Already drawn up?" I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "How long have you been planning this behind my back?" 6 months, Jason said, and I could hear the smugness in his voice. "We've been discussing what's best for the family." "We?" "So everyone knew except me." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We knew you'd react like this. You're being selfish, Erica." Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. I looked at my family. These people I'd loved and sacrificed for my entire life, and realized I didn't know them at all. "You know what? You're right," I said, grabbing my purse. "I am selfish. Selfish enough to expect that 34 years of being a good daughter might count for something. Selfish enough to think that love isn't measured by how much you struggle or how many babies you produce. As I headed for the door, Jason called out, "Don't be dramatic, Erica. You'll get over this." I turned to face him one last time. There was something in his eyes, a glint of triumph that seemed deeper than just winning our parents' favor. It was the look of someone who'd played a long game and won. That look would haunt me for weeks. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage, but as I pulled into my apartment complex, something shifted. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold determination. There was more to this story, and I was going to find out what Jason was really up to. 2 weeks after that horrible dinner, I was still trying to process what had happened. I'd thrown myself into work, staying late at the office and avoiding my parents' calls. Then fate intervened in the form of my cousin Amy. Amy worked as a teller at Colorado First National Bank, and we met for lunch at our usual spot, a small cafe downtown. She could tell something was wrong the moment she saw me. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thanks. Exactly what I needed to hear," I replied, attempting a smile. "Seriously, what's going on?" I told her everything about the inheritance dinner. Amy's expression grew increasingly incredulous as I spoke. "That doesn't make any sense," she said when I finished. Jason's loaded. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What do you mean, loaded?" Amy's eyes widened. "Oh God, you don't know." She glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but Jason has 3 separate accounts at our bank. I saw them when I was training on the new system. Together, they've got to be worth at least $200,000. The coffee cup clattered back onto the saucer. "That's impossible. He told our parents he's near bankruptcy. He said he can barely make ends meet." "Well, he's lying," Amy said simply. "And that's not even counting whatever he might have at other banks." That afternoon, I called in sick for the rest of the day and started investigating. It's amazing what you can find with public records and a determination to uncover the truth. Within hours, I'd discovered that Jason owned 2 rental properties in Aurora that Head never mentioned to anyone in the family. The property records showed Head purchased them 3 years ago, right around the time he was telling our parents he needed money for his failed restaurant venture. But the real shock came when I did some social media stalking on Brittany's family. Her parents had sold their tech company last year for millions, and Brittany's Instagram, which she thought was private but hadn't blocked me from, showed plenty of evidence of expensive vacations and designer purchases. A little more digging revealed that property records showed Brittany's parents had gifted them $50,000 just last year. Armed with this information, I drove to Jason's office the next day. He worked at a commercial real estate firm downtown, a job he constantly complained paid too little. I waited in the lobby until he came down for lunch. "Erica." He looked genuinely surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk." Privately. He led me to a coffee shop around the corner, his expression wary. Once we were seated in a back corner, I laid out everything I'd discovered. "You've been lying to Mom and Dad for years," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "You have money, Jason. Lots of it. So why are you manipulating them into giving you everything?" For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw the real Jason underneath, the calculating, cold stranger who'd replaced my brother. Then he smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen on his face. "You always were too smart for your own good," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I have money. But why should I spend mine when I can have theirs too? Because it's wrong. Because they're our parents." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Our parents who always loved you more? The golden child who could do no wrong? Do you know what it was like growing up in your shadow? My shadow? They paid for your entire college education while I worked 2 jobs. Because you were capable of working 2 jobs. I wasn't. That's the difference between us, Erica. You've always been the strong one, the independent one. Me? I learned to play the hand I was dealt, by lying and manipulating." His expression hardened. "By surviving. And if you think you're going to waltz in and destroy everything I've built, Think again. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was our parents, and Dad was struggling to remember my name. I've been documenting their decline for 2 years. Confusion, memory lapses, poor decision-making. If they suddenly change their will, I'll have them declared incompetent. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He leaned forward. And there's more. I know about the Ferguson account. My blood ran cold. The Ferguson account was a mistake I'd made at work 3 years ago. A filing error that could have cost the company thousands. I'd caught it and fixed it before anyone noticed, but I'd never reported the original error. How do you know about that? Brittany's cousin works in your IT department. Amazing what people will share after a few drinks. Now, that error might have been innocent, but covering it up? That's fraud, Erica. Career-ending fraud. I stared at my brother, this stranger wearing Jason's face, and realized the depth of his manipulation went back years. Every family gathering, every casual conversation, had been collecting information, building leverage, playing a game none of us knew we were part of. You're sick, I whispered. Impractical, he corrected. And am going to win. Mom and Dad already signed everything over. It's done. So go back to your successful life and leave me alone. He stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Erica? If you're thinking of telling Mom and Dad about this conversation, remember that I've got them convinced you're bitter and jealous. Who do you think they'll believe? The devoted son who stayed close to home, or the daughter who's been distant and independent? As he walked away, I sat frozen in that coffee shop, my mind racing. Jason had been playing chess while the rest of us didn't even know we were on the board. But Head made one mistake. Head revealed his hand too early, and now I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. 1 month after the inheritance announcement, I finally worked up the courage to try one more time with my parents. I'd spent weeks documenting Jason's lies, creating a file of evidence that surely they couldn't ignore. I called Mom and asked if I could come over to talk. Of course, sweetheart, she said. And for a moment, she sounded like the mother I remembered. Your father and I have been worried about you. When I arrived at their house on a Thursday evening, they were both in the living room. Dad was reading his newspaper, and Mom was knitting. A scene so normal it made my chest ache. They looked older somehow, more fragile than they had just a month ago. I'm glad you came, Mom said, setting down her knitting needles. We've missed you. I've missed you too, I said, sitting across from them. That's why I need to talk to you about Jason. Dad's expression immediately closed off. Erica, we've been through this. No, please, just listen. I pulled out my folder of evidence. Jason has been lying to you. He has over $200,000 in savings. He owns 2 rental properties. Brittany's family gave them $50,000 last year. Has not struggling? Has wealthy. Mom shook her head. Where would you even get such information? Public records? Property files? It's all here. I spread the papers on the coffee table. Look at this. These are the deed records for his rental properties. Dad barely glanced at them. You've been spying on your brother. I've been trying to protect you. Has manipulating you both. The only manipulation I see, Mom said coldly, is you trying to turn us against Jason because you're jealous. Jealous. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I make good money. I don't need your inheritance. I just can't stand seeing you being deceived. You've always resented Jason, Dad said, his voice firm. Ever since you were children. That's not true and you know it. Isn't it? Mom stood, pacing to the window. You've always had to be the best, the most successful. You couldn't stand that we wanted to help Jason more because he needed it. He doesn't need it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Enough. Dad's shout made both Mom and me jump. We've already transferred the deed to the house to Jason. It's done. The room spun for a moment. You already transferred the deed? When? Last week. Mom said quietly. Jason said it would be better to do it now. For tax purposes. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. And the savings accounts. We're in the process of moving those too, Dad said. It's what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? How is giving everything to one child best for everyone? Mom turned from the window, and there were tears in her eyes. Because Jason needs us. You never have. You've always been so independent, so capable. Do you know how that makes us feel? Like we're not necessary in your life. So, you're punishing me for being self-sufficient. We're not punishing you, Dad said, tiredly. We're just being practical. Jason and Brittany are struggling. They needed our help with something recently, a business opportunity that required significant capital. The sick feeling intensified. What kind of business opportunity? Jason wanted to open a restaurant. Mom said. He had such a wonderful business plan. We co-signed a loan to help him. You co-signed a loan? For how much? $400,000, Dad said. And my heart stopped. We used the house as collateral. It was the only way the bank would approve it. You mortgaged the house? The house that's been paid off for 15 years. It's an investment in Jason's future, Mom said defensively. In our grandchildren's future. When did you do this? 6 months ago, Dad admitted. 6 months ago. Right when Jason said they'd been planning the inheritance changes, everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. And how's the restaurant doing? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. There have been some delays, Mom said carefully. Some unexpected costs. There's no restaurant, is there? Of course there is, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jason showed us pictures, business plans. Have you seen it? Have you been there? Silence. Where's Jason now? I asked. Hez on a business trip, Mom said. To Costa Rica. Hez meeting with potential investors. Hez in Costa Rica. With Brittany and the kids. Yes, it's partially a family vacation. Has been so stressed. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search for Costa Rica extradition laws. My parents watched, confused. What are you doing? Dad asked. Checking something. I looked up at them. When's the mortgage payment due? The mortgage? Mom's face paled. Why? Because if Jason used that money for something other than a restaurant, and if he's not planning to pay it back, you're going to lose your house. That's absurd, Dad said. But his hands were shaking. Jason would never. Mom's phone buzzed. She looked at it and all color drained from her face. She showed it to Dad, whose expression turned to horror. What is it? I asked. The bank, Mom whispered. The mortgage payment. $40,000. It's due tomorrow. $40,000? For one payment. We took an adjustable rate to get the money faster, Dad said, sinking into his chair. Jason said he'd handle the payments from the restaurant profits. Call Jason, I said urgently. Right now. Mom dialed with trembling fingers. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. His phone must be off, she said weakly. The international charges. Try Brittany. Brittany's phone also went to voicemail. My parents looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Real, bone-deep fear. We don't have $40,000, Dad said quietly. We gave Jason access to all our liquid assets for the restaurant. All of them. He said he needed operating capital. We transferred everything to his business account 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, right after they'd transferred the house deed. Mom sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. What have we done? I wanted to comfort them, to tell them it would be okay, but the anger was too fresh, too raw. They'd chosen Jason over me, believed his lies over my truth, and now they were facing the consequences. Mom looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and typed something on her phone. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text from her. The mortgage is due. I stared at the message. Then at my parents, these people who'd dismissed me, hurt me, chosen my lying brother over me, and now expected me to save them. Please, Erica, Mom whispered. We need your help. I stood up, gathering my folder of useless evidence. You made your choice. You both made it very clear that Jason deserves everything and I deserve nothing. So let Jason handle this. Erica, please, Dad said, standing. We could lose everything. No, I corrected, heading for the door. You already gave everything away, to the child who deserved it, remember. As I drove away, I saw them standing in the doorway, looking older and more fragile than ever. My phone buzzed repeatedly with their calls and texts, but I didn't answer. They'd made their bed with Jason's lies. Now they could lie in it. But as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at that text from my mother, I knew I couldn't just abandon them completely. They were fools, but they were still my parents. I just needed to handle this my way. I didn't respond to my mother's text immediately. Instead, I let it sit there on my phone screen. Those 4 words burning into my retina. The mortgage is due. For 3 days, I didn't respond while my phone lit up with increasingly desperate calls and messages from my parents. I needed time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to investigate. My friend Sarah worked as a forensic accountant for a large firm downtown. We'd known each other since college, and she owed me a favor from when Id helped her through her divorce 2 years ago. I called her on Friday morning. I need your help, I said, without preamble. It's about my brother, the golden child who got everything. Sarah had heard me vent about the inheritance situation. That's the one. I think he's done more than just con my parents. I think he's committed fraud. Sarah was intrigued. We met for lunch, and I laid out everything I knew about Jason's hidden assets, the mysterious restaurant that didn't seem to exist, and the convenient trip to Costa Rica just as the mortgage came due. Give me 48 hours, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. I'll see what I can find. While Sarah worked her magic, I paid a visit to my friend Marcus at the county clerk's office. Marcus and I had dated briefly a few years back, and we'd remained friends. He couldn't give me official information, but he could point me in the right directions for public records. That's interesting, Marcus said, looking at his computer screen. The deed transfer to your brother happened, but then 3 days later, he transferred it to an LLC. What LLC? JB Enterprises LLC. Registered in Delaware. Delaware. Of course. The state famous for its corporate privacy laws. Can you see anything else about this LLC? Not much, but there's a pattern of transfers. Money coming in, money going out. It looks like... He trailed off, frowning. What? It looks like a washing machine, if you know what I mean. Money laundering. My successful brother was washing money through an LLC using my parents' house as the vehicle. Saturday afternoon, Sarah called me with her findings, and they were explosive. Your brother is in serious trouble, she said without preamble. I found evidence that he's been embezzling from his employer for at least 2 years. What? How? Has been creating fake vendor accounts and approving payments to them, then routing the money through various LLCs, including the one that now owns your parents' house. We're talking about nearly $500,000. Oh my God, that's not all. Has also been filing false insurance claims using your parents' social security numbers, 3 claims in the past year, totaling about $75,000. I sank into my couch, overwhelmed by the scope of Jason's crimes. What do I do with this information? You could go to the authorities, Sarah said carefully. This is federal wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. The FBI would be very interested. If I do that, my parents lose everything anyway. Maybe not. If you play this right, you might be able to protect them, while still stopping Jason. That evening, I finally responded to my mother's text. I'll handle this my way. Mom called immediately, but I didn't answer. Instead, I sent another text. Give me 1 week. Don't contact Jason. Don't sign anything. Trust me. Sunday morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I liquidated part of my retirement account and took out a personal loan, combined with my savings. I had just enough for what I planned to do. Monday morning, I walked into Colorado First National Bank and asked to speak with the mortgage department. The loan officer, a middle-aged man named Robert, looked puzzled when I explained what I wanted. "You want to purchase your parents' mortgage debt?" he asked. "Yes. They're in default. Or about to be. The bank would rather have some money than go through foreclosure, right?" "I'm offering 60 cents on the dollar." Robert's eyes sharpened. "That's a very specific offer. You understand this would make you the lien holder? Your parents would owe you, not the bank." "I understand completely. You'll need to run this by my supervisor." 2 hours later, I walked out of the bank as the legal holder of my parents' mortgage. They didn't know it yet, but I now controlled their house. Or rather, I controlled the debt on it, since Jason's LLC owned the deed but I owned the debt. I had significant leverage. Tuesday, I made an anonymous call to Jason's employer's fraud hotline. I gave them enough information to start an investigation, but not enough to trace back to me. I also contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and filed a report about the insurance fraud. Wednesday, Sarah called with more news. I found Jason's offshore accounts, 3 of them, in the Cayman Islands. Has been moving money there for 18 months. How much? At least 800,000, possibly more. Can we prove it? I have the transaction records. It's enough for the feds to get warrants. Thursday morning, a week after Mom's desperate text, Jason returned from Costa Rica. I knew because Brittany posted on Instagram about being home from paradise. Within hours, Jason would discover his company had frozen his accounts pending investigation. The FBI would be preparing warrants. The walls were closing in, and he didn't even know it yet. I sat in my apartment, looking at the mortgage documents that gave me control over my parents' future, and the evidence that would destroy my brother's life. In my hand, I held justice. But I wanted more than that. I wanted my parents to see the truth. I wanted them to understand what they'd nearly lost and why. So I called my mother. "Erica, thank God. We've been so worried. The bank called and said someone purchased our mortgage debt, but they wouldn't say who." "It was me, Mom." Silence. We need to have a family meeting. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, at your house. Make sure Jason is there." "Erica, what's going on?" "Tomorrow, Mom. Everything will be clear tomorrow." As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow, the house of cards Jason had built would come tumbling down. Tomorrow, my parents would learn exactly who their children really were. Tomorrow, justice would finally be served. But tonight, I sat alone in my apartment, the girl who'd been cut out of the will because she didn't deserve it, holding all the cards and preparing to play them. Jason thought Head won the game, but Head forgotten one crucial thing. I'd learned to play chess too, and I'd been thinking several moves ahead while he was still celebrating his last turn. Friday afternoon arrived gray and overcast, matching the gravity of what was about to unfold. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a leather folder containing copies of everything Sarah and I had uncovered. My parents answered the door together, their faces drawn with worry and confusion. "Jason's in the living room," Mom said quietly. "He's very upset about his accounts being frozen at work." "I'm sure he is," I replied, walking past them. Jason was pacing near the fireplace, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his expression darkened. "I'll call you back," he said to whoever was on the line. "Erica, I should have known you were behind this." "Behind what, Jason?" "Your company discovering that you're a thief." "You don't know what you're talking about." Brittany emerged from the kitchen, looking polished as always in her designer clothes that my parents' money had likely purchased. "Oh, Erica's here. How wonderful. Come to gloat about buying your parents' mortgage." So Jason knew about that too. Good. "Actually, I came to tell the truth," I said, setting my folder on the coffee table. Everyone should sit down. We don't need to listen to this, Jason said. But Dad's voice cut through the tension. Sit down, son. We all need to hear what Erica has to say. Something in Dad's tone must have registered because Jason sat, though his body remained tense, ready to spring up at any moment. Brittany perched beside him, her perfectly manicured hand on his knee. I remained standing, opening my folder methodically. Let's start with the restaurant, Jason. The one that needed $400,000. The one our parents mortgaged their house for. Where is it? It's in development, Jason said smoothly. These things take time. Really? What's the address? The location isn't finalized. What's the name? We're still workshopping that. I pulled out a piece of paper. This is from the Secretary of State's office. No restaurant business license has been filed under your name, Brittany's name, or any of your LLCs in the past year. Mom gasped. No license. There is no restaurant. I said simply. There never was. That's ridiculous. Jason stood up. I showed you business plans, projections. Anyone can make those up. What you really did with the money was funnel it through JB Enterprises LLC. The company you transferred Mom and Dad's house deed to without telling them it was an LLC. For tax purposes, Jason said. But his voice was losing its confidence. For money laundering purposes, I corrected. You see, Jason has been stealing from his employer, Pinnacle Commercial Real Estate, for 2 years, creating fake vendors, approving payments, and routing the money through various LLCs, including the one that now owns this house. You're lying, Brittany said, but her voice shook. I pulled out Sarah's forensic accounting report. Every transaction is documented here. $473,000 stolen over 24 months. The room was silent except for Mom's sharp intake of breath. But that's not all, I continued, warming to my subject. Jason has also been filing false insurance claims using your social security numbers. 3 claims. $75,000. Insurance claims. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. In our names. Medical equipment that was never purchased. Home repairs that never happened. A car accident that never occurred. Jason's face had gone pale. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. And I have. I've already submitted everything to your employer and the FBI. The FBI. Brittany stood up so fast she knocked over Mom's favorite vase. It shattered on the hardwood floor, but no one moved to clean it up. Wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. I listed. All federal crimes. Jason lunged toward me, but Dad stood up, placing himself between us. Don't you dare touch her. She's destroying our lives, Jason shouted. You destroyed your own life, I replied calmly. I'm just shining a light on it. Why? Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. Jason, why would you do this to us? For a moment, Jason's mask completely fell away. The charming son, the devoted father, the struggling businessman, all of it disappeared, leaving behind someone I didn't recognize. Because I deserved it, he said, his voice cold. I stayed here, I gave you grandchildren. I played the dutiful son while Erica ran off to build her perfect life. Do you have any idea what it's like being the failure in the family? Being compared to perfect Erica every single day. We never compared you, Dad said. But Jason laughed bitterly. Not out loud, but every time you talked about Erica's promotion, Erica's new apartment, Erica's success, I heard what you really meant. Why couldn't I be more like her? So you decided to steal from us? Mom asked. I decided to take what I was owed, and I would have gotten away with it if she hadn't stuck her nose where it didn't belong. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. We all froze. That would be the FBI, I said quietly. I told them you'd returned from Costa Rica. Jason's face went white. You called them here? Now. I thought our parents deserved to see the truth. Brittany started crying. I didn't know anything about this. I swear, I didn't know. The doorbell rang again, followed by a firm knock. FBI. We have a warrant for Jason Patterson. Dad moved to answer the door, his movements mechanical, like he was in shock. 2 agents in dark suits entered, their badges visible. Jason Patterson, the lead agent, a woman with short gray hair, asked, "That's him," I said, pointing to my brother. "Mr. Patterson, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As they cuffed Jason, he looked directly at me. "I'll never forgive you for this." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I replied. "I'm seeking justice." "What about my children?" Brittany sobbed. "What am I supposed to tell them?" "The truth," I said. "That their father is a criminal who betrayed his own parents." Jason tried to maintain his composure as the agents led him toward the door, but then he turned back one last time. "You want to know the really pathetic part?" he said, looking at our parents. "I never even loved you. Either of you. You were just means to an end. Walking ATMs too stupid to see what was right in front of you." Mom collapsed into Dad's arms, sobbing. The sound followed Jason out the door and into the FBI's car. Brittany stood in the ruins of her life, mascara running down her cheeks. "What am I supposed to do now?" "First, you get a lawyer," I said. "Then you tell them everything you know. The FBI will be more lenient if you cooperate." "I really didn't know," she whispered. "I thought the money was from his job, his investments. He handled all the finances." I believed her. Brittany might have been materialistic, but she wasn't a criminal. She was another one of Jason's victims. "Brittany," I said more gently, "do you know about the offshore accounts?" Her head snapped up. "What offshore accounts?" "Jason has been moving money to the Cayman Islands. About $800,000. $800,000? We've been living paycheck to paycheck. He said we were broke, that we needed your parents' help. He was planning to leave," I said, the realization hitting me. The Costa Rica trip wasn't about investors. He was scouting his escape route. He was going to abandon all of you. Brittany sank onto the couch, the fight completely gone out of her. "What about my kids? How do I explain this to Tyler and Madison?" Mom, despite everything, sat beside her daughter-in-law and put an arm around her. "We'll help you through this. The children are innocent in all of it. I watched my mother comfort the woman who'd been part of the conspiracy to rob her, and I saw the strength I'd always known she had. Even in her darkest moment, she could find compassion." Dad stood by the window, watching the FBI car disappear down the street. "How did we not see it?" he asked. "How did we miss what he really was? Because you wanted to believe the best in him." I said, "Because parents aren't supposed to have to protect themselves from their children." "We failed you," he said, turning to me. "We failed you so completely." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." The honesty of it hung in the air between us. There would be no easy forgiveness, no simple return to the way things were. Trust, once shattered, could never be fully restored. But perhaps something new could be built from the ruins. 3 weeks after Jason's arrest, the full scope of his crimes became clear. Federal investigators had frozen all his assets, including the offshore accounts Sarah had discovered, the rental properties, the hidden bank accounts. Everything was now under government control. Jason faced up to 20 years in prison, though his lawyer was trying to negotiate a plea deal. I sat in my attorney's office, reviewing the documents that would determine my parents' future. Since I owned their mortgage debt and Jason's LLC owned the deed, but Jason's assets were frozen. The situation was complicated. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in financial fraud cases. "You have several options," Janet explained. "You could foreclose on the property, taking possession from the LLC. You could negotiate with the federal government once they seize the LLC's assets. Or," she paused, studying me over her reading glasses, "you could make a deal with your parents directly." "What kind of deal?" "Transfer the deed back to your name in exchange for forgiving the debt." The government would have to approve it since the LLC is under investigation. But given that the original transfer was fraudulent, they'd likely agree. I thought about my parents. Who'd aged 10 years and 3 weeks. Mom barely ate anymore. And Dad spent his days sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. They'd been victims, yes. But they'd also chosen to be blind. Set up a meeting with them, I said. And Janet? Draw up a trust document too. The meeting took place the following Tuesday at Janet's office. My parents arrived looking frail and uncertain. We hadn't spoken much since Jason's arrest, just practical communications about the legal situation. They sat across from me at the polished conference table, and I saw them truly for the first time. Not as the infallible parents of my childhood, but as flawed, vulnerable people who'd made terrible mistakes. I'm prepared to offer you a deal, I began. Keeping my voice professional, I'll forgive the mortgage debt entirely, and will work with the authorities to transfer the deed from Jason's LLC to a trust. A trust? Dad asked. The Patterson Family Trust, with me as the trustee. You'll have lifetime residency rights. You can live in the house until you die. But you can't sell it, mortgage it, or transfer it without my approval. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You want control over us. I want to protect you from yourselves. I corrected. And from any future Jasons. We wouldn't fall for that again. Dad protested. Wouldn't you? You fell for it this time, even when I showed you evidence. You chose to believe his lies over my truth. They had no response to that. There's more, I continued, pulling out another document. This is a financial statement for my company, Technova Solutions. They looked confused. Your company, the startup I founded 3 years ago. The one I never told you about because I wanted to succeed on my own merits, without family pressure or expectations. I turned to the relevant page. We just closed our Series B funding round. The company is valued at $30 million. I own 40%. The silence in the room was deafening. 30 million, Mom whispered. My portion is worth about 12 million. Though it's not liquid until we go public or get acquired. But I've been taking a good salary, and I have stock options worth another 2 million that are already vested. You're a millionaire. Dad's voice was hollow. And you never told us. Would it have mattered? You still would have given everything to Jason because he needed it more. You still would have seen my success as proof that I didn't need parents. Mom started crying quietly. We thought you didn't need us. I didn't need your money. I needed your love. There's a difference. We do love you, Dad said urgently. You love the idea of me, the successful daughter you could brag about. But you don't know me at all. Did you know I've been in therapy for 2 years dealing with feeling like I had to earn your love through achievements? Did you know I've been dating someone for 6 months but didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd compare us to Jason and Brittany? Did you know I volunteer at a literacy center every weekend because it reminds me of when Mom used to read to me before Jason came along and needed all the attention? Each revelation hit them like a physical blow. We didn't know any of that, Mom admitted, because you never asked. Every conversation for the past 5 years has been about Jason's problems, Jason's needs, Jason's family. When did you last ask me how I was doing? Not how work was, but how I was. They couldn't answer. Janet cleared her throat. Should we proceed with the trust documents? Yes, I said. But I have conditions. Conditions? Dad asked. You both attend family therapy with me. Weekly sessions for at least 6 months. You need to understand how you were manipulated, and we need to learn how to be a real family, not just people related by blood. Therapy. Mom sounded uncertain. Jason exploited your vulnerabilities. Your guilt about not being perfect parents. Your fear of being unnecessary. If you don't address those issues, someone else will exploit them too. What about Brittany and the children? Mom asked. They're innocent in this. I've set aside funds for Tyler and Madison's college education. It will be held in trust until they're 18. As for Brittany, she's filed for divorce and is cooperating with the FBI. Shall receive some of the seized assets once the case is resolved. Dad looked at me with something like wonder. You've thought of everything. I had to. No one else was going to protect this family from itself. We signed the papers. My parents' signatures shaky but determined. As we prepared to leave, Mom stopped me. Erica, that money you spent to buy our mortgage, that was your savings, wasn't it? Most of it, I admitted. Why? After everything we did, why save us? I thought about it for a moment. Because love isn't about deserving. Jason thought everything was about who deserves what. Keeping score, winning, and losing. But that's not love. Love is protecting people even when they've hurt you. Love is setting boundaries while still caring. As for Brittany, she's filed for divorce and is cooperating with the FBI. She'll receive some of the seized assets once the case is resolved. Dad looked at me with something like wonder. You've thought of everything. I had to. No one else was going to protect this family from itself. We signed the papers. My parents' signatures shaky but determined. As we prepared to leave, Mom stopped me. Erica, that money you spent to buy our mortgage, that was your savings, wasn't it? Most of it, I admitted. Why? After everything we did, why save us? I thought about it for a moment. Because love isn't about deserving. Jason thought everything was about who deserves what, keeping score, winning and losing. But that's not love. Love is protecting people even when they've hurt you. Love is setting boundaries while still caring. Dad had written it. His careful handwriting visible even from where I sat in the gallery. Our son Jason betrayed our trust in the deepest possible way. He exploited our love, manipulated our fears, and nearly destroyed our family. But in doing so, he revealed the truth about ourselves, that we had failed our daughter Erica by mistaking need for love and independence for indifference. We cannot undo the past, but we can learn from it. We hope Jason uses his time in prison to reflect on his choices and find redemption. As for us, we're committed to rebuilding our family on a foundation of truth, not lies. Jason laughed when the statement was finished. Touching, he said sarcastically. Did Erica write that for you? No, Dad said from the gallery, standing up. I wrote it myself, because unlike you, I can admit when I'm wrong. Madison, 11, still laughed easily, but sometimes asked difficult questions that none of us quite knew how to answer. The therapy sessions with my parents had been painful but necessary. Dr. Chen, our family therapist, had helped us unpack years of dysfunctional dynamics. Mom admitted she'd always felt guilty about going back to work when Jason was young, and had overcompensated by indulging him. Dad revealed he'd seen his own father in Jason, charming but unreliable, and had hoped that enough support would change him. I think I knew, Dad had said during one session, his voice broken. Deep down, I think I knew something was wrong with Jason, but it was easier to pretend, to hope, to enable. And Erica paid the price, Dr. Chen had observed. She became hyper-independent because she couldn't rely on you to see her needs. I see them now, Mom had whispered, reaching for my hand. I see you now, sweetheart. It wasn't perfect. Trust, once broken, leaves scars. But we were trying, and that was more than I'd hoped for. At Thanksgiving dinner, Mom had made all my favorite dishes, not just Jason's. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Daniel, who'd been patient and supportive through the entire ordeal, helped Dad carve the turkey while sharing stories about his work as a pediatric surgeon. I like him, Dad whispered to me as we set the table. He's genuine. Unlike Jason's charm, I asked. Testing. Exactly unlike that, Dad said firmly. I've learned to tell the difference. After dinner, Brittany surprised us all by standing to make a toast. She looked healthier than she had in months, having started her own journey of recovery. I wanted to thank you all, she began, her voice steady, Especially you, Erica. You could have let us all drown in Jason's lies. But you saved us. You saved my children from growing up, thinking manipulation was love. You saved Harold and Margaret from losing everything. And you saved me from a marriage built on deception. You saved yourself, I corrected. You chose to cooperate, to rebuild, to move forward. Still, Brittany continued, I owe you an apology. I was part of the problem, encouraging Jason's behavior, enjoying the benefits without questioning the source. I'm sorry. We all are, Mom added, raising her glass of sparkling cider, to second chances and hard truths. To family, Dad added. Real family, built on honesty, not manipulation. We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the anger I'd carried for so long. Later, as we sat in the living room watching the kids play a board game, Mom pulled me aside. I have something for you, she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. Mom, what is this? It's from the sale of some assets the FBI released back to us. Jason had purchased them with money he stole, but because we were victims, we received partial compensation. We want you to have it, to replace what you spent saving us. I don't need it, I started to say, but she stopped me. This isn't about need. It's about what's right. You sacrificed your savings to protect us. Let us do this one thing. I accepted the check, not because I needed the money, but because they needed to give it. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Dad answered it and returned with a certified letter. It was from Jason. We all tensed as Dad opened it. Inside was a single paragraph in Jason's handwriting. I'm writing this because my lawyer says it might help with my parole hearing. I take responsibility for my actions. I hurt my family, and I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me. Jason, do you think he means it? Mom asked. No, I said honestly. He's still manipulating, still playing angles. But maybe 5 years in prison will change that. Maybe not. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. Brittany stood up. I need to show you all something, she said, pulling out her phone. She showed us an email from her lawyer. Jason had a life insurance policy I didn't know about. It's worth $2 million. And he never changed the beneficiary from when we first got married. The lawyers say it's legally mine. We all stared at her in shock. I've decided to put half in trust for the kids' education and future, she continued. And I want to give the other half to you, Harold and Margaret, to truly replace what Jason stole. We can't accept that, Dad protested. You can, and you will, Brittany said firmly. Consider it justice. Jason would hate knowing his hidden policy is being used to undo his damage. There was poetic justice in that, and eventually, my parents agreed. As the evening wound down, I stood on the back porch with Daniel, looking at the stars, the same stars I'd looked at as a child, dreaming of the day I'd be successful enough to earn my parents' pride. You did it, Daniel said, wrapping an arm around me. You saved them all. I saved myself first, I corrected. Everything else followed from that. What happens now? I thought about it. My company was thriving, my relationship was solid, and my family was slowly healing. Jason was in prison, facing the consequences of his choices. Justice had been served, but more importantly, truth had prevailed. Now we move forward, I said. We take what we've learned and build something better. Inside, I could hear laughter, real laughter, not the forced kind wed all perfected during Jason's reign of deception. Madison was winning the board game, Tyler was pretending to be outraged, and the adults were cheering them on. Erica, Mom called. We're starting charades. Your favorite. My favorite, she remembered. As I walked back inside, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 6 months ago, it'd been cut out of the will, deemed undeserving of inheritance. Now, I controlled the family trust, protected my parents' assets, and had helped rebuild our family on a foundation of truth. But the greatest inheritance wasn't money or property. It was wisdom. The knowledge that love isn't measured by need, that independence doesn't mean isolation, and that sometimes the best way to honor your family is to protect them from themselves. Jason had been wrong about deserving things. Life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we choose. He chose deception, manipulation, and greed. I chose truth, justice, and ultimately, forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that forgets or excuses, but the kind that releases the burden of anger while maintaining healthy boundaries. As I joined my family for charades, Madison ran up and hugged me. "Aunt Erica, you're on my team. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else," I said, meaning it. Mom smiled at me across the room, a real smile that reached her eyes. Dad gave me a thumbs up. Brittany mouthed "thank you" over the kids' heads. Daniel winked at me, proud and supportive as always. This was my family. Imperfect, scarred, but real. Jason had tried to destroy us with his lies, but in the end, his betrayal had forced us to confront our own truths. And in that confrontation, Wed found something Wed never had before: authentic connection. The greatest reversal of fortune wasn't Jason's fall from grace or my rise to control. It was the transformation of our family from one built on assumptions and manipulations to one grounded in honesty and genuine love. As we played charades late into the evening, I thought about everyone watching or reading this story. How many of you have your own Jasons? How many of you have been overlooked, undervalued, or manipulated by those who should love you most? How many of you have been told you don't deserve something because you're too strong, too independent, too successful? Here is what I learned through this painful journey. Your worth isn't determined by your need. Your value isn't measured by your dependence. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to enable those who would destroy themselves and everyone around them. If you're facing a similar situation, remember this: truth always comes to light eventually. Justice may take time, but it does arrive. And the most important inheritance you can give or receive isn't money or property, but the wisdom to recognize real love from manipulation, the strength to stand up for what's right, and the grace to rebuild when everything falls apart. To those who've been cut out, overlooked, or deemed undeserving, your success is not a reason to punish you. Your independence is not a flaw. Your strength is not a burden. You deserve love, respect, and fair treatment just as much as anyone else. And to those who've been enablers, who've mistaken need for love, who've rewarded manipulation while punishing success, it's never too late to see the truth. It's never too late to make amends. It's never too late to rebuild on a foundation of honesty. Jason is serving his time, paying for his crimes, but the rest of us are serving something too. Notice that change is possible, that families can heal, and that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important revelations. I'd like to ask you, have you ever faced betrayal from family? How did you handle it? Did you fight back like I did? Or did you walk away? What would you have done if your parents had chosen your sibling over you, only to discover they'd been deceived? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about family, justice, and redemption. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with family manipulation or favoritism. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you don't have to earn love through suffering. You don't have to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. And you certainly don't have to accept less than you deserve because someone else claims they need it more. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never apologize for your success. The right people will celebrate your strength, not punish you for it. Until next time, this is Erica, reminding you that the best inheritance you can give yourself is the wisdom to recognize your own worth, regardless of what others think you deserve.